Welcome to another episode of Zero Velocity Podcast. I'm your host, Brad Thorpe. Today, we're talking about isometrics for running and how you can potentially prevent some injuries and increase your athletic performance. Because let's be honest, running is one of the world's most awesome activities, right? There in the United States of America alone, there's over 60 million runners, whether it's running marathons, trail running, or basically just recreational runners, just let's call them enthusiasts. Now, with so many people running, there's got to be some positives to it. So let's look at the top 10 benefits associated with running, right? So here we got a whole bunch of stuff, right? So we got running, it adds years to your life. Who doesn't want that? But more importantly, it also adds some quality to your life, which is pretty cool. It helps you sleep better. It can improve your knees and back from injuries. It can also help you lose some weight, improves your immunity, helps with your cognitive function, reduces risks of cancer, improves mental health, improves glucose regulation associated with diabetes, and it's been shown to lower blood pressure, which is pretty amazing. Now, where there's benefits, there's some risks, right? So one of the things that I want to talk about today is kind of how you mitigate those risks. Because one of the things that we have to think about when we're looking at risk is that studies show 90% of runners are injured by running. That is ridiculous. Now here's an interesting part here, this little study over here. So it says 68.3%. So it was a study just released a couple weeks ago. But the main outcome of the present study is self-reported injuries and incidents remain high, 68.3, with the even distribution of injuries in foot, ankle, knee, calf, shin, hip, groin. The research also identifies a large variation in training shoes technique choices of runners. So I'm not going to sit here and beat that down today because there's no purpose, right? 54 million people are injured by running out of those 60. But we're not here to talk about that. What we're here to talk about today is how do we make running healthier for 54 million more people? Right? So I'm going to show you some exercises that are going to help you run potentially, and I use that word and emphasize potentially, because the odds are not in my favor here at 90% injury rate, but I believe strongly that by adding isometrics to your preparatory phase of running, we are going to help basically get rid of all running-related injuries. Yeah, all. Want to know why? Because most people, what they do before running is they stretch, right? So we know the number one reason people stop running is not because of anything else outside of injury, because runners are addicted to running. The results are amazing when you do it, but the pain stops people from doing the activity they love. So our goal is to help them. Now, one of the things that I want you guys to focus on, now, do up your muscles has to be a calling card going forward, right? Stop stretching your muscles and loosening them off, right? It would be the same as loosening off your shoelace, like undoing your shoe before you go for a run. So one of the number one things you can do prior to running is stop stretching, and that's going to eliminate the risk or substantially reduce that risk. Now, do up your muscles. Now, how do you do up your muscles? Well, welcome to my world of isometrics, right? Whether it's neurological activation of the tissue, which is primarily done through isometric-based exercise. Yes, you can guess, hope, and pray doing dynamic exercise that you're targeting a specific tissue for activation. You know, it's less effective. So our goal, if we're going to reduce injuries, we got to raise the game and we got to start doing something we've never done before. Preparing the muscles to actually run. And how do you prepare that? You do isometrics. So what we're going to show you is some exercises for your lower body to help get rid of running-related injuries, because I think they should be obsolete. And hopefully you guys think that too. So what we're going to look at first is we're looking at how do you stabilize your glute structure, because that's the power generation for your runners. So quickly, glute medius, boom, stand here. If you're pre-running, think 15, 20 seconds. You don't have to do crazy time. Now, you also can turn your leg in, right? So that's going to hit a different division of your glute medius, and you can turn it out. So highly recommended. Hamstrings, often injured with runners. You get hamstring strains and stuff like that. 100% preventable. Want to know how? Get your quad stronger as you're moving forward, right? So when you're running, you're throwing that lower leg. So that's your tibia. So you're throwing your tibia forward, right? That has mass. There's also a thing called inertia. So as you're throwing that forward, your hamstrings say tighten up in order to prevent this lower leg bone from flying off your foot. Now, to give you reference of what inertia is. So, see how that stool is pretty static. I'm going to move that back in space. So if I'm running and I go like this, you see how that carried forward. That's inertia. So I change the inertial effects of that stool, it flew in space, and that potentially poses risk. So if I want to get stronger there, learning how to be in a hip flexed, knee extended position and generate loads out there will allow me to overcome many running related injuries. Why? Because I learned how to accelerate to an end position. Now, those are two areas, right? So we got our quads, and then we had our glute medius. Now, here's one of the coolest things that you guys will learn today. Your Gluteus Maximus, this big, huge bad boy right here. The one that they say is all about hip extension. Well, if you look at the fiber line, and I'm not going to drop the shorts to show you the fiber direction, but you can feel on yourself. Your bum doesn't go straight down. It goes across your body. It sort of angles down, comes into your IT band, this thing over here. So the easiest and quickest way to train your glute maximus is to basically find an object that doesn't move, bring your foot back, right? So you're going to bring that back. And then you're going to turn it out. And then you're going to drive back, right? So if you come straight back, that's going to be for your hamstring. If you turn your leg in, it's actually going to be for the medial side of your leg. It gets into your adductors. Now, one of the things you could do if you wanted to add a dynamic element is be back here, learn how to actually rotate your leg in and out. That's a great exercise for developing that glute. Now, interestingly, if we want to look at how you start to combine different movement sequences for running, we can now look at hip extension and hip flexion, right? So as I'm driving this knee up, this has to stay nice and tight. Now, by adding these specific exercises, and you notice where my load placement is, I'm actually increasing my ability to dorsiflex. If I press my support leg down into the ground, that's going to help work on plantar flexion, right? So that motion of learning how to drive my knee up and come up. So you can hold up there, bring that up, right? And then get strong. And that will help with basically the orchestration of a bunch of different muscles in your lower leg. Now, one of the things that we sort of skimmed over were just some of these areas where injuries occur. Primarily, running-related injuries are associated with your lower body. So, if we can reduce that risk, I think it's going to be better. Now, what I want to show you is some ankle-specific exercises, right? Because it's not just your hip and your knees that get beat up. A lot of foot and lower leg injuries are associated with running. So, let's jump back over here. And what you have to do, from here, if we're looking at dorsiflexion specifically, right, drop down, and obviously I have an MSK, so I can target all these tissues within nanoseconds. You at home, figuring out how to do isometrics, to be honest, it's challenging because you don't have the restraint necessary to actually increase the strength and stability of your foot or your knee and stuff like that. Because I'll be honest, doing this and just holding that without restraint, like the last exercise I just showed you, is, well, to be honest, not very effective. This, on the other hand, having that restraint allows you the ability to get stronger, to increase load tolerances. So that's one way you can look at dorsiflexion. You know, could you work on different calf exercises? Well, the answer is yes, you can. So if I started to get my legs stronger, so I'm actually now working on that tibialis anterior muscle, right? So that's down through here. So it comes from that lateral side of your tibia, comes across. It's one of your primary dorsiflexors. Hugely important to work. Now, we also sort of say, well, what about my peroneal group? So those things on the outside. Well, if I dropped this right down, I could sit there and just press my foot out. And I know it's kind of hard for you guys to see. So what it is I'll just move this out of the way. It's kind of like I'm just trying to go like that movement there. And what I have is this obstruction to drive that leg out, right? So that's going to help work the peroneal. So these muscles down the lateral side of your fibula. And how and why are they important? Well, they help control your ankle. So one of the major risks associated with running is terrain, right? So as that terrain moves underneath your foot has to adapt instantly. Remember where I said we're going to sort of do up your muscles. That's why it's super important to also do up your laces. Making sure that your foot is, or your footwear is snug to your foot is essential also for eliminating the risk of injuries. That's pretty much all I got today. So what we want to do is end with one final slide. Now let's go running pain-free. It's my challenge to you guys. I want you to run faster and shorter distances because it's actually safer than longer distances. Now, there is significant risk. So do your isometrics prior to your running. Let me know how it's going, right? And don't forget, there is no major, there's no magic cure to running related injuries. It's about how you prepare, and it's about the regression of running so you don't get injured, right? Because one thing that runners typically don't talk about is the amount of strides they take during their run. Think of total impact forces that you got to think about. So each force that enters your body, you got to prepare for. And if you're not prepared for, you're gonna end up injured. And the thing is, our goal with helping you run better is not to help you run injured. Our goal is to help you run injury-free. Do your isometrics, and we'll see you next week on Zero Velocity Podcast. I just want to take the time to thank our sponsors, Kinvent, Zenkai Sports, and ISOPHIT for sponsoring the Zero Velocity Podcast. Thank you, guys.